This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
One of the more anticipated UFC cards in quite some time is finally here. UFC 300 is tomorrow. A couple of main events, a lot of good fights, and a lot of fun to break it all down. We're going to do that today with Austan Swaim getting his read on the two title matches, other spots he likes, and much more to get you ready for UFC 300. Then later on today, we'll talk to Austan Kas about EPL Matchweek 33. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research. Joined here to kick things off by Austan Swaim. Check him out on Twitter at aswaim3. Find his work at FanDuel Research and, of course, over on the Heat Check, talking UFC each and every week. They're on the FanDuel Research podcast feed. Austan, happy UFC 300 to you. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Jim. I got to give credit where credit is due to UFC. This is the deepest MMA card I have ever seen. I couldn't believe it could get deeper than this one. Very first fight up on the card, usually rookies, debutants, people we don't really know. We got former champions, like recent champions within the last 8 years. So this card is loaded top to bottom. I had a great time previewing it earlier this week, and I can't wait to talk about it with you too.
Do you have a fight you're most excited for this weekend?
Well, see, that's a great teaser because what you and I we'll talk about the two title fights today. We'll talk about some other stuff, but I don't really have maybe a great betting angle, like a super strong betting lean in Austin's fight of the night, which also happens to be for the BMF title belt. You can guess what BMF stands for or Google it yourself.
It's Samuel L. Jackson from Pulp Fiction, his wallet. Yeah,
exactly. And that fight's going to be insane. I'm going to preview that on the Heat Check later today. We'll talk about that pretty in depth from a stylistic perspective. And I think that's my favorite. I think it's everyone's favorite. We can't wait to see Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway square off for that belt.
I think the issue is that now I already need an extra screen to watch the Masters. Now I might need a third or fourth or fifth one to watch Pulp Fiction during work. So this is detrimental to my production. And if people have issues with what I get done today, blame Austin. We'll dive in to UFC 300 here with Austin in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. On Monday, Tom Vecchia will be with us to break down the NBA's play-in tournament. Talk about betting that with Tom on Monday. So make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. You can also find this show on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. As mentioned later on today on the FanDuel Research podcast feed, Austin will be breaking down UFC 300, both for betting and for DFS. So find that on the FanDuel Research podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Austin, we're going to talk about the card here in a second and talk about these specific fights. But because it's such a big card, we've had betting markets on these fights up for a very long time. And the concern always is that a more mature market tends to be a more efficient market. So are you seeing value out there still, despite the fact that we've had these fights posted for a while, or has most of that value dried up?
Yeah, it definitely has dried up a little bit, which you really should consider as a bettor before going nuts at this card and taking my advice, because you're not getting the best of the number. And you value bet NASCAR using a model. I tried to do the same for UFC. The small difference in implied probability can be a huge difference between showing value, not showing value. And it's important to get the best of that number. And in a lot of cases, we haven't. It's very interesting. I haven't laid a bet since Tuesday when props came out on most domestic sports books. And I just, for whatever reason, maybe it's good fortune, none of these lines have moved against me in this particular way. I haven't had one money line or prop that has now moved against me. And I said, I wish I waited. It looks like things are generally trending in the same direction as me. That's not always the case. It makes me feel really excited going into a big card like UFC 300. That's the case. You look at Jamal Hill in the main event. He was available a couple weeks ago for about plus 130 odds, 42% implied. Now 48% implied right now at the number he sits on FanDuel. Aljamain Sterling could have been had a month ago for minus 115. He's now minus 180. So big jumps and gaps in a market this mature. It was a New Year's resolution of mine given that I started using a model trying to do this with implied probability to dive into these cards right after the UFC cards on Saturday, get into next week, get better value. I've had a significantly better start to 2024 to 2023 doing that. So it's huge advice that I would give to anyone that is diving in and trying to value bet really any sport, but especially UFC.
So we'll be picky for today
Yeah.
because, as you said, these markets are mature and the value has a lot of it has gone away. So, as always, when you're betting a market closer to first tip, opening bell, et cetera, make sure you take into account the fact these markets haven't picked over a bit, but hopefully still some lingering value out there. So let's talk about the first of the two title fights on this card. Yan Xiaonan taking on Zhang Weilei. Zhang is the big favorite here at minus 500 on the money line. So a clear favorite here, Austin. How do you see this fight playing out?
So it's not the most desirable fight to me from a betting perspective. I have to pick this carefully because when you just start this fight, women's strawweight title fight, divisional trends of women's strawweight, a lot of decisions. And so then you're going into some of the variance that comes with MMA judging, tight rounds. Both of these ladies kind of mirror different strengths of each other. My model when I ran it has Zhang with a pretty convincing result as you'd expect given her money line. 69.4% of the time she ends up winning. But I've got the fight 65% likely to go the distance. But those numbers actually show value on Yan Xiaonan at this implied probability. I really just can't get there when what Xiaonan has anecdotally struggled with is a lot of what Weilei can do very well. Yan was controlled for 9 minutes, 21 seconds by Mackenzie Dern. She got stuck underneath Carla Esparza, actually ended in a TKO with elbows in the second round. Weilei is just coming off a fight where she landed 6 takedowns in over 16 minutes of control time. Really, the one susceptibility, what we've seen from Weilei Zhang, has been power, but Yan doesn't really provide that either. 0.13% knockdown rate. She's actually coming off her first career knockdown in her last fight, if you expect lightning to strike twice, against a pretty durable customer in Weilei Zhang. My model would say there is still value here because I'm so bullish on this fight to go the distance. On Weilei to go to by decision, I've got it at plus 180. It's plus 185 on FanDuel. I've got it at plus 150. But something I know about my model, it can really struggle in these 3 versus 5 rounders because the bulk of the data I take in is for a 3-round fight. I try to adjust it, but it's probably more accurate that the model is saying it's plus 150 for Weilei to win and this fight to go at least 3 rounds. You look at the alternate market on round prop betting on FanDuel Sportsbook, which is why I love FanDuel. They have this catalog of things you can do. Alternate round betting, Jim, if you look Weilei Zhang to win in round 4, round 5, or by decision, is plus 100. So I'm not even showing value against that number. I don't really have a specific lean here in this fight, even though I expect Weilei to win. And she posts a lot of takedowns, significant strikes per minute. I love using her in a DFS setting over in FanDuel DFS contests, but I don't know if I have anything to wager on here.
Okay, so a stay away here for the first title match on the card. Now let's talk about the second one. Alex Pereira taking on Jamal Hill. You mentioned this earlier on. Hill is shortened quite a bit, now plus 114, whereas Pereira sits at minus 140 to win this match on the money line at FanDuel Sportsbook. Any value stand out to you in this one, Austin?
So this is kind of the polar opposite of that one, where I've had substantial action on Hill now for weeks since this matchup was out. I feel so great about my assessment of this, even though my model is not particularly helpful in it because it's so one-dimensional. Both of these guys are just insane kickboxers. They don't really wrestle or grapple at all. My model's giving a lean to Pereira for quote-unquote grappling upside because he has 1 submission attempt against 0 for Hill in his entire career. It ain't really happening. And why I love Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill, he's plus 114 on the money line right here, FanDuel. I got him at plus 125, but either one is fine because when I look at the distance striking component of this model, my model loves Jamal Hill to win the significant striking differential in this fight. I don't know if you remember this, Jim, but the very first UFC podcast I did for FanDuel of any kind was the Heat Check. We were talking DFS. That very first card had Jamal Hill on it as a prospect on the prelims. We were talking MVP candidate in DFS that week. Those gaudy peripherals have never gone away. 7.31 significant strikes per minute, 54% striking accuracy. He landed 239 significant strikes in his last fight against Pereira's coach, Glover Teixeira. So his volume, his accuracy, he's shown no durability issues so far. The only reason he's not the champion is because he tore his Achilles early last year. He's now made that recovery, says he's back 100%, and I believe that based on the timeline. I talk a lot about where my model's different. I'm actually really in line with props in this fight. If you go to the method of victory, Hill is plus 200 to win by knockout. I've got him at plus 210. Hill is plus 650 to win by decision. I've got plus 595. So I'm very close on the two props. He doesn't really have a lot of submission danger. I'd rather just take the money line, and I still think plus money is very acceptable here.
As mentioned, that is plus 114 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook for Jamal Hill to win this fight, taking on Alex Pereira. I know the Achilles data when it comes to the NFL, and it's pretty grim there, but I'm curious what it's like for UFC. Is there data on return outlook for fighters coming off of such a gruesome injury?
Yeah, I can't actually think of another recent Achilles injury. A lot of times you see ACLs. You actually see a lot of broken bones in UFC, whether they be elbows or, unfortunately, like Chris Weidman or Anderson Silva, legs at times from throwing leg kicks. I can't think of another fighter that tore his Achilles. He didn't do that in the cage. It was playing pickup basketball. So I don't really know. Yeah, I don't really know what to expect from Hill. It is a brutal injury, but I will say I think his style works in his favor. If he needed more power in his legs for wrestling or grappling, I think it would be one story. But Hill is a southpaw. He's not super mobile at 205 pounds, as is by one. Most of his talking is with his hands, and that's why I think he feels so confident here. And I feel like I'm going to get a pretty similar version to what I've seen before.
All right, so we're liking Jamal Hill on the money line, plus 114 right now for that one over at FanDuel Sportsbook. But as mentioned, 11 other fights on this card. Let's begin things with the money lines, Austin. Which other money lines are you targeting for UFC 300?
So it's kind of odd that I'm telling you to go to UFC prelims when this fight could absolutely headline a main event at the Apex. Jessica Andrade taking on Marina Rodriguez in the third fight up on the card here. We've talked a lot about value that's left the station. This one is not quite there for me. Jessica Andrade was minus 125 on Sunday. It sucks that she now sits at a larger number, minus 140, but I'm still showing value when I've got her minus 155 to win. I'm still of the belief, and my co-host on a YouTube show I do, Maddie Tanner, laughed at me. I think Jessica Andrade is the one strawweight that might be in the tier of Weili Zhang as far as well-roundedness, power, athleticism. I think she could be the second or best strawweight in the world. And then she's taking on Marina Rodriguez here. Andrade is just 32. She's had a 5-fight stretch in 2023 that she came out and she said she was paying some divorce bills. It's kind of the ugly reality of the sport is that, they take more fights in order to be able to pay their bills, maybe not the most prepared to actually win them. And that can happen. Fighters have admitted to it. But when you saw her back on a full camp in her last fight against Mackenzie Dern, 4 knockdowns and just 53 significant strikes landed. The power was out of this world. I think the big theme of this fight is well-roundedness. Jessica Andrade has a plus 1.31 striking success rate. That's not quite as good as Marina Rodriguez, plus 1.88, but Andrade has that second pitch, that changeup, that secret weapon that has given Rodriguez trouble. She lands 2.45 takedowns per 15 minutes with 54% accuracy. So she's very efficient wrestling. We just saw Rodriguez cede over 12 minutes to Verna Jandy Hobo last year in control time. The magic number is 3 here. Rodriguez is winless in 3 fights where her opponent has landed at least 3 takedowns. I think Andrade can beat that 3 takedown mark and make it number 4.
What does the model do for alimony narrative? Like what's the bump for alimony in the UFC betting model?
I have a recent form input, and it's actually penalizing Andrade quite a bit for a few losses that she took.
So alimony is a negative input then?
It is.
Okay.
It's a negative input, but the reality is Andrade was also facing top 5 girls in the world when she was fighting and losing. So it's not exactly like it's a horrible stain on her type of loss that would have me concerned about recent form when she's dropping back outside the top 5 here to face Rodriguez.
Okay, so Austin likes Jessica Andrade minus 140 over Marina Rodriguez on the prelim card, despite the fact that Andrade gets a downgrade for the alimony narrative here this week. Which other money lines do you like at FanDuel Sportsbook, Austin?
So I'm looking at an underdog with my second one here. It's actually 2 fights down the road. Sadiq Youssef taking on Diego Lopez. If UFC had a Rookie of the Year award, I undoubtedly think it would have gone to Diego Lopez. He is nonstop fun. On nearly 3 days' notice, he almost took the unbeaten record from Movsar Evloev, ended up losing a decision in that fight. But then he had 2 other wins inside of 2 minutes. And this is now a fight for him to potentially enter the rankings at featherweight, one of UFC's deepest divisions. I just don't know if he's ready. And his stats can kind of tell you exactly how he fights. He's a ground fighter, but he's gone 0 for 1 on takedown attempts so far, so not really good at getting it there on his terms. 37% striking defense is there to be hit. 42% takedown defense to me is the big red flag here, because he's willing to go to his back. He's willing to give up control time to his opponents, hoping to get a submission off his back. But as you advance in competition, guys are better at jiu-jitsu. Those tricks, those pulls, those arm bars, they're not quite as effective. And I think Sadiq Yusuff is one of those well-rounded guys where it won't be that effective. He's never been finished in 9 UFC fights. He has 3 finishes of his own, including a submission against Don Shainis. And the gap in striking success rate here couldn't be much more stark for guys around the rankings. Plus 1.39 striking success rate for Yusuff, negative 2.24 for Lopez. I think Diego is a submission off his back or bust in this fight, even with a huge input in my model, which is actually Tapology's community rankings, because I'll admit I don't know everything technically about UFC. Lopez is an overwhelming public sentiment favorite to win here. I still got Yusuff at minus 115 and favored in this spot because of his stats, because of his efficiency, because of his level of competition. I do think he should be favored. And weirdly, even though I know the attention is likely on Lopez, this number hasn't budged all week. It sat right here in this plus 116, plus 120 number. Looks like it got a little bit better overnight, but I still feel very confident in Yusuff and think he should be favored.
Okay, and that is the Yusuff money line taking on Lopez plus 120. That's in the prelim card for this week. Let's talk about some props, Austin. Where are you seeing value in the prop market for this week?
So we'll go up onto the main card, a lightweight title eliminator between Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan. Heck of a fight, and I really do think that there's a good way to back Charles Oliveira given the stylistic approach that he takes. This guy's a car crash every time he gets in there. He's been done inside the first 7.5 minutes in his last 4 fights, and that's kind of how Oliveira rolls. He's got this massive knockdown rate. He's the UFC's all-time leader in submissions, but he doesn't really win minutes. It's a little bit of what I was talking about with Diego Lopez. He's plus 184 on his money line, but if you go to his double chance odds, if you scroll down a little bit on the main page of FanDuel, his double chance odds to win in this fight are plus 240. It is a decision that I made to back him in this way. I got a little bit better of a number, but I still like plus 240. My model's really far off where I'm favoring Oliveira to win here outright, but I do think if he does win, it'll be inside the distance because Arman Tsarukyan, better control wrestler, will be able to have that top position, but Oliveira, what this number is saying is that it's about 6% that he's going to end up winning by decision. I've got that number at 4.2%. I think it's even lower. It's effectively 0 in my mind. So I like taking Oliveira on this market rather than taking his money line. Charles Oliveira, it's weird that he's a huge underdog here because he looked great last July. He's only 34, which is still in the analytical prime input in my model. I'm expecting Oliveira to win inside the distance 48.9% of the time. Again, very little decision equity versus Tsarukyan to win inside the distance 22.1% of the time. I don't know if you heard UFC raised performance bonuses in this for this card from $50,000 to $300,000. That is a huge jump. And these guys are going to try to be going for finishes from the opening bell. It makes me a little trepidatious about this next prop that I've loved all week, but I don't think it matters. But if they're going for finishes, I love Oliveira in a car crash type of environment here. I'm going to take him at this number. A key red flag for me entering this fight. I mentioned Oliveira has 13 submissions, most in UFC history. Arman Tsarukyan has never found an attempt in 9 fights. Could be a difference, could be the mismatch for Oliveira to secure a sub and get one of those 300K bonuses.
Okay, so that's Oliveira versus Tsarukyan. Right now, Oliveira by knockout or submission is plus 240. Now, you caught my attention, not with the car crash stuff, with the age curves, because I love age curves as someone who does a lot of NASCAR and Formula One stuff. What is like peak age for UFC typically?
It is exactly 30 years old, which makes it nice, even and round. And anytime before or after that, I have an input in my model that regresses. Sometimes, as in a fight earlier on the prelims, you go up into the 40s, and it's really punitive. But it's 30 years old is the peak prime. The median age, I believe, for a UFC champion is around 30.3, 30.4. So it's right on that number.
So the Jimmy Johnson ding is in there for a couple fighters for this week. Any other props? You mentioned one that makes you a little bit uncomfy. What was that one?
So I like this a lot better before the performance bonuses got boosted up, but I still do think the pace and the tempo of this fight is going to work in our favor. It's the featured prelim between Yuri Prochazka and Alexander Rakic. Rakic coming back for the first time since 2022, had one of those ACL injuries I mentioned earlier, and Yuri Prochazka is not an easy return fight. Former champion in this division, just fought Alex Pereira for the championship. That's why Pereira has the belt right now. The prop I love in this fight is Yuri Prochazka to win by decision. It's 6-1 on FanDuel. A thing that I want people to remember, because we're going to fixate on the bonuses, but excluding Bo Nickel, who's minus 3,500, the largest UFC favorite ever, and looks like he's going to break the record for that. There are 18 other fighters in 3-round fights on this card. 15 of them have been in 5-round fights at some point since the COVID break. These guys are usually champions. They're main event players. They usually have a different tempo that now they're going to be shrunk down into 3-round fights. It may be tough for some of them to adjust and go as hard for a finish or as hard to the opening bell. There's always risk doing that in a 5-round fight. So the tempo might be a little bit slower. I know the performance bonus is out there, but if you don't get that finish in a couple of minutes, it's probably not coming anyway. And this card's also littered with experience. So my model is showing a lot of value on decisions, which is a little scary again, because they just raised the bonus yesterday. But I love Yuri Prochazka by decision in this fight. When you look at how Alexander Rakic has fought inside of the rankings, inside of them, he's had just 3.44 significant strikes landed per minute, 1 total takedown. It's very little activity. It's hard to win decisions. He's been squeaking by on very tight margins. But if you look at Yuri, who started his UFC career in the rankings, 5.31 significant strikes per minute. Very accurate with them, 53%. Some might take issues with Yuri's defense, but Rakic is not this frantic, powerful, surgical finisher. He's much more of a point fighter, and I don't think that's going to get better coming off a huge layoff, which analytically is not good for win probability. Is coming off a layoff as long as this, but I also don't think it's going to do favors for his volume or his explosiveness. I think we get a typical Rakic crawl here, but Prochazka squeaks it out on volume. I love 6-1 in this fight. My model has it plus 335. So one of the most valuable props I've seen this week.
Okay, that is again Yuri Prochazka to win by decision. 6-1 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, taking on Alexander Rakic. That is Austan Swaim. Make sure you check him out on Twitter at aswaim3. Again, find full breakdown of this card and also the DFS lineups for this card on the FanDuel Research podcast feed later on today. Austin, I appreciate the time as always. Enjoy all the fights. Hopefully lives up to the hype. We'll talk to you once again soon.
Okay, Jim, sounds good. Enjoy Pulp Fiction, buddy.
I will, very much so. Thank you. Appreciate that. Again, find Austin on Twitter at aswaim3. We're going to talk some EPL with Austan Kas here in just one second. But first, the Masters is now underway, and FanDuel is giving new customers an offer unlike any other to celebrate, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with any $5 bet. That's $150 to use on outright winners, round leaders, longest drives, my favorite 3 balls, and much more. Plus, you'll get paid instantly when you bring home a major win this major season. So don't wait. Go to FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook and swing for some green at Augusta. Must be 21 plus or 18 plus in DC and present in select states. First online real money wager only, $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, DC, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, Vermont, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana, visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org. Or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, as if it wasn't enough to have UFC 300 and the Masters both going on this weekend, we've also got a full slate of EPL to kick things off on your Saturday mornings. Let's bring in Austan Kas now of FanDuel Research, a senior editor there, to break down EPL Matchweek 33. Austan, welcome into the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jim. How are you?
I am delightful, excited to have a great sports weekend on tap. Not just those things, but also selfishly NASCAR on Sunday, which should be a whole lot of fun. Now, Austan, 10 different matches on tap for Match Week 33. So let's start things off here with the traditional markets. What are your favorite bets there at FanDuel Sportsbook for this week?
So I really just have one bet that I like for traditional markets this week, and it's in the first match of the weekend, Saturday, 7:30 in the morning Eastern time. I really like over 3.5 goals for Tottenham Newcastle. We've talked a lot about Tottenham this year, about how fun their matches have been just from a neutral point of view in terms of watching. We've hit on overs in a few of their matches. I think this should be another high-scoring Tottenham matches. Both of these teams are pretty attack-minded. Newcastle were excellent defensively a year ago, but injuries have really doomed them this campaign. They've conceded the 7th most expected goals according to FBref's XG model. Tottenham have been giving defensively as well. They've allowed the 9th most XG. Usually when Tottenham matches are free-flowing with a lot of chances, as they have been for most of the year, it's due to how Tottenham play. But Newcastle have been very similar. They're just as committed to attacking, even in spite of all their injuries. In Newcastle's last 7 matches against teams in the top half of the table, there's been a combined 34 goals, which is 4.8 per match. All but one of those matches went over 3.5 goals. So they've been very attack-minded. They, regardless of the situation, score. They push forward and attack. Tottenham is the exact same way. I think this could be a wildly entertaining match. And I think we're going to see a lot of chances for both sides. So I like over 3.5 goals.
Austan, did I undersell how good this Saturday morning is? Because that sounds awesome. Like, it sounds like pure chaos, and I'm fully in on that.
It should be really fun. Yeah. Okay, I can't wait to watch it. So, yeah. I mean, my fear is that there's a bunch of chances and it's still like 1-0. But I think we're going to see a lot of chances. And just based on their track record, I mean, the stat with Newcastle, there are 34 combined goals in their last 7 matches. Like, it's crazy. It's going to be a little basketball-like at times. We're just end to end.
Okay, so we've got your kids as your alarm clock, and you're grateful for that this weekend because of Newcastle versus Tottenham. Over 3.5 goals, -108 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can also have the Masters on your second screen there too. So a very fun Saturday morning there. Let's talk some player props, Austan. Where are you seeing value there for this week?
So I've got 2 that I'm backing here. The first one is in the Crystal Palace-Liverpool match at 9 a.m. on Sunday. This is a huge matchup for Liverpool. Basically every match is for them the rest of the way as they try to win the title. They just had a really disappointing 3-0 home match last night in the Europa League. So they should be ready to go for this one. I think they'll bounce back Saturday against Palace, and that puts me on Luis Diaz to score or assist at -115. That's a market we've really leaned on heavily this year, and I'm a big fan of it. Palace's overall defensive record isn't bad at all, but they've had road versus the league's top teams. They gave up 5 goals at Arsenal, 2 at Man City, 3 at Villa, 4 at Newcastle, 3 at Spurs. Diaz has 8 goals and 4 assists in 25 league starts. He has a goal or assist in 3 straight league matches, and I like him to do so again if he starts, and that's a big caveat. Lineups will be out at 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. I think he'll probably start, but I'm not going to place this bet until I see that he is for sure. I think there's a chance Diogo Jota, another Liverpool attacker, is back healthy, which could mean Diaz ends up as the odd man out. I'm not sure, but like I said, I think he'll probably start, but I'm going to wait to verify that for sure.
Okay, that is for the Liverpool versus Crystal Palace match. Luis Diaz -115 to score or assist, but Austan is saying to hold off on that until Sunday morning, 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern is when those lineups will be out. Wait until then to place it if Diaz does wind up starting, because there's a chance he is not in that starting 11. Any other props you like across Match Week 33, Austan?
Yes, so Saturday at 10, the Sheffield United-Brentford match. I like Ivan Toney as an anytime goal scorer at -135.
Old reliable. Love it.
Yeah, I know. We usually do goal or assist with him, but that's pretty steep this week because They're playing Sheffield United. We've discussed how bad Sheffield United are. The numbers say they're one of the worst Premier League teams of all time, maybe the worst. They have a negative 52 goal differential so far. That's 22 goals worse than any other teams. They've allowed 82 goals in 31 matches. That's 15 more than any other team this season. In 15 away games, they've given up 35 goals. So I say all that to say Brentford should score. They're minus 265 to score at least twice. Tony's the main man for them, and he should be on the end of a few chances. On top of that, not only does he take penalties for them, but he's one of the best penalty takers in the league, which is obviously good news for this market. So I like him to score a goal against Sheffield United. While minus 135 isn't the most fun, I think it's more than fair given the matchup and Tony's ability.
Value is value, so we'll never say no if it's a good value bet. Now, Tony got off to that crazy hot start after his suspension ended, and he's been in a bit of a rut. Is that just the fact that Brentford's maybe not up to, the standards of a lot of teams they face and now get a good matchup, or what do you think has led to the dry spell here for Tony?
I would say part of it is probably just the schedule. They've had a pretty difficult schedule. They actually gave him a day off, and they scored 3 goals at Aston Villa. So maybe that's not a great look for him, but they've had a tough schedule. And I think some of it might be fatigue. He didn't play for so long, and then they threw him in there, and he was basically playing 90 minutes every match for a few weeks in a row. So the fact that they set him at Aston Villa last weekend tells me maybe he was a little gassed. And he also got called up for England during international break and got to play for them, which is awesome for him, but just that's usually a stretch where he would get some time to rest, and he didn't get that. So, yeah, I would say there's probably fatigue and a mix of fatigue in their schedule.
Okay, well, we are back to old reliables, I get this week, plural, because we got Newcastle in there, over 3.5 goals for that Tottenham matchup, minus 108. Luis Diaz score assist, minus 115, and our old friend Ivan Toney to score a goal, minus 135, as Brentford takes on Sheffield United. That is Austan Kas. Check him out on Twitter at Austan Kas. Find his work at FanDuel Research. Austin, I appreciate the time as always. Enjoy a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you once again soon.
Sounds good. You too, Jim. Thank you.
Alrighty, and that is all that we have here for today and this week here as well on Covering the Spread. I want to thank you all for tuning in throughout this week. Back again next week, as mentioned, with Tom Vecchio breaking down the NBA play-in tournament and his thoughts on that from a betting perspective on Monday. Big thank you again to Austan Swaim for swinging by breaking down UFC 300. Check out his show on the FanDuel Research podcast feed later on today to get you ready for both betting and DFS for that card. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can also find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets this weekend. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you once again on Monday. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.